Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. We just talked about Will Howard. Can he answer the bell? Can he be the quarterback that Ohio State needs him to be? And if he's going to be that, how many rushing yards does he have to have? Because that is definitely going to be a huge part of the equation. But let's get into who is going to be the odd team out in the SEC. This has kind of been the underlying question in the SEC. We've had so many different questions as we head in. Can Texas and OU jump in and immediately start winning? Is Georgia still the class of the SEC? Can Bama be the team that they have been in the past without Nick Saban? There's so many different things to kind of wager as we head into this year, but the top thing that I've noticed across pretty much every fan base as you've gone through Twitter and all of the different social apps, they all expect a lot. Pretty much every single team in this conference expects a lot this upcoming year, but the teams that I'll really dig in on are Georgia, Texas, Bama, Ole Miss, LSU, Missouri, and Tennessee. Frankly, I think all of those teams are looking at this year and finding 10 wins on that schedule, plain and simple. So that can't happen. They just cannot happen. There's no mathematical world where that unfolds. So who's going to be the odd man out? Who's going to be the team that leaves this year just a little bit upset, whether that's an 8-4 record or even a 9-3 record, but didn't necessarily win the games that you needed to win to get into the playoffs? So obviously, that's the end goal. Everyone wants to be in the dance. Everyone wants to be in the playoff, and you're going to have to compete with quite a few teams to get there. So it'll be really interesting to watch this, but let's get into the top two teams first, and we'll start with Georgia because Georgia hasn't lost a regular season game in 39 games. They do face a tougher schedule this year, no doubt about it, but frankly, I think there's almost no chance that they go from winning 39 straight to losing 4 or even 3 of 12. I understand those 3 road games that they have to play are going to be really tough. You'd be hard-pressed to tell me that they're going to lose all 3 of those games. But this is one of those teams that, frankly, they're above doubt at this point. If they come out this year and they're really flat and they go in the wrong direction, then we're having a very different conversation at the end of the year, obviously. But as of right now, Georgia is the best program in the country, and I'm never going to predict that they lose 4 games or even 3 games in a season as of right now. As for Texas, this one's a little bit more variable, right? This is the team that is walking into a conference that is going to be a little bit tough. What's going on, Jay? How you doing? This is a team that you have questions. Is D-line going to be a problem? Is running back going to be a problem? Can they handle the physicality? All of those stuff are definitely going to come into play. There's no doubt about that. But Texas does have a very nice schedule. In the grand scheme of the SEC, where there's not really a nice schedule among them, but if there was, Texas would be probably the prime example. So I tend to believe that this is more of a schedule type pick. I think 9-3 is roughly where they're going to end if things go wrong. I think if things go really right, obviously they can go 12-0. But as of right now, I don't see a bottoming out feature for Texas this year. Now, there is still that possibility, but I think a lot of things would have to go wrong, including a number of injuries for that to happen. Moving on to Bama, this is a team that has a wide range of possibilities this year. There are a number of people that are very much cheering for this to be a 7-5 team and be able to look at the end of the year and say it was all Saban. It was all Saban keeping everything rolling over there, but they're also a team that can walk into Atlanta and take home a second consecutive SEC title. So they can do a number of different things this upcoming year. I think they are a team that has a little bit more variability. I do see an 8-4 record in this year for Bama in some variation. Now, it's going to take quite some time. There's no two ways about that. I don't think this is going to be a big-time bad team by any means, but there's always that reality. A lot is changing over there. Nick Saban walking out the door and so many different things changing. There's a reality where a lot of things go wrong and they end up 8-4 and leave this season really wondering what the future of that program looks like. As for Ole Miss, I think you look at this team and the question more than anything else is can they not have big time injuries that get in the way because the depth is not necessarily where you want to be, and do they have the comfortability on defense to play an elite level football every single week? And frankly, I think that has a little bit more to do with Pete Golding than the actual personnel, because don't necessarily love Pete Golding, but that's a conversation for another day. I do think this is a team that has every single ability to win a national title. There's nothing this team can't do this upcoming year, but at the end of the day, when you're replacing that much on a defense that wasn't necessarily great last year, but obviously you upgraded at a number of positions, there's still the question of putting it all together and figuring it all out. So they have a little bit of bust potential. I don't necessarily think they're going to be the team that is at least entirely left out. Maybe they don't make the playoff, and that would be a disappointment. But at the end of the year, I don't think they're going to be a team that's 8-4, 7-5, and looking at this year as a what happened type year. Moving on to LSU, I mean, you look at this team, and this is probably the easiest argument to make of the bunch because the defense is not going to be great, plain and simple. You can't go from what they were last year to a great defense in 1 year just because of some staff changes. I do love the staff changes, and I do think they're going to be a very, very good team this upcoming year, but when you look at this team, there's always a reality where the defense doesn't move forward very much, and without Jaden Daniels, without Malik Neighbors, without Brian Thomas, you don't have the guys on the outside or at quarterback to make the plays you need to. So this would be the team that, frankly, you could probably make the easiest argument with, and we'll see if that's the team that I end up picking. But Missouri is a team that I think is really interesting, and I think they have a number of different things that there's not a ton of stuff that looks really off. Now, the defense I have some worries about because I think they transferred in a lot of really good players, but when you're losing guys like Chris Abrams-Drain and Enos Rakestraw, those guys can't really be replaced. Now, you can play good football behind them, but when you have that amount of ability and that amount of talent coming out of that area, it's going to be really hard to pull this off. But overall, I think they're a team that absolutely can make some things happen, but I do have some worries on that defensive side of the ball. Tennessee is another team here, and the question is really, is Nico Iamaleava going to be able to hit the notes right away? Is he going to be able to be a guy that walks in his first full season running this offense and be full go? And that's a question that I have. I do think he's a remarkably talented kid, and if it's not this year, 2025 will be darn right remarkable from him. But at the end of the day, I do think this is a very good player and definitely someone that can hit those notes, but on the flip side, it is his first full year starting, and that always can go a little bit sideways. And then the back-end defense is definitely a little bit of a worry for me as well. So there are questions around all of these teams. And then you got a number of different ones on the back end where Texas A&M, OU, maybe even Kentucky are sitting there. In fact, I saw a video of Kentucky fans finding a path to the playoffs. So everyone's thinking this way. That's the way that this works. But if I'm picking a team, if I'm picking one out of the hat and saying this is going to be the one that's left out, frankly, it's going to be more than one. So you could include LSU in this. You could include Texas A&M and OU and a couple other teams in this. But at the end of the day, the team that I think is going to have the biggest trouble is Missouri. And it's the weirdest thing in the world because the schedule is not very hard. The schedule is not one that you look at and it's an absolute murderer's row of SEC schedules. So it's not a problem of the schedule. It's not even a problem of a lot of the personnel, at least. The defensive side I have my big-time worries about, but I just don't think this team is going to take that big-time step forward from last year. I think last year they did a number of incredible things, but also last year they had a number of games that came down to a bounce of a ball, someone not picking off a pass from Brady Cook that was off target, or Chris Abrams-Drain or Enos Rakestraw making an incredible play on the back end of that defense to shut down a drive. So overall, I think I look at this not as a kind of indictment of this team or making this team out to be any worse than they're going to be in the future, because I still think they're building something really incredible over there. But at the end of the day, you usually find that when you have luck one direction one year, it kind of comes back to bite you the other year. And frankly, this is another thing that could apply to a team like Texas that had a number of one-score games and ended up coming out on the right side of them. But if a ball bounces the other way in a number of those games, they're coming on the wrong side, and they're looked at a lot differently going into this year. So, and actually, we'll get into that tomorrow, I believe. But overall, I think I look at Missouri and I think they had a lot of magic last year, and I think some of that magic is going to run out. Now, the easiest argument is comfortably LSU. I can make that argument in my sleep. I'm just buying into LSU a little bit more than some other people. Tennessee, I could argue that Nico won't be ready for the moment and won't be able to walk into Sanford Stadium and be able to put up the numbers that he needs to. So there's a number of different arguments across pretty much every team on this list, all the way up to Bama. But at the end of the day, I think Missouri is going to be the team that walks out and just says, we had more on the table this year. We had more that we could have done with Luther Burden, with all of the wide receivers they have, with Brady Cook in his third year starting. There were so many things in place that I think even a 9-3 season where you miss the playoff is going to be like, man, we had an opening to make something happen. If one play goes our way throughout that last little bit, we're in the playoff. So it's not necessarily going to be a overwhelming, disappointing season like a 7-5 or anything, but I'm a little bit worried about Missouri. And Jay, who will win? I have Georgia winning this conference. I do have Georgia and Texas facing off in the championship. I know it's a little bit of a chalk answer, but overall, I think those two teams are just a little bit different than everyone else and a little bit deeper and have the ability to sustain some of the injuries that some other teams like Ole Miss, Bama, and Missouri, maybe even Tennessee, just can't quite sustain as well. So I am picking those two teams to meet and Georgia to take home the trophy, but frankly, any of the teams I just named could do it. So it's going to be a crazy year in the SEC, but at the end of the day, someone's going to be disappointed, and it'll be really interesting to see who that team or who those teams are at the end of the year. But let's take our third break here, and when we come back, we're going to break down some fall camp intel. There's so much going on around the country. There's a very interesting news out of Boise State. There's an injury at Louisville. There's some injuries at Oregon that I need to get you updated on. So we'll break it all down right after this, so stick with us.